Tonight, you do not need to master the ancient world. You do not need to remember a single date, a single battle line, or the proper order of men whose names still echo through marble hall. You only need to rest where you are. Let the room around you grow softer. Let another world come into focus at a gentle distance. Ancient Greece waits for you there, glowing as it so often does in the modern imagination. White stone in warm light, olive trees silvering in the breeze, blue water. Temples on hills, philosophers speaking as if they had all the time in the world. From far away it looks almost easy to love, and that is part of its charm. Distance at its hardship. It softens dust into atmosphere and turns discomfort into romance. It lets a civilization become a picture before it becomes a life. But the life comes first, long before Greece was admired. It was inhabited by tired bodies, thirsty hands, sore feet, thin bedding, rough cloth, uncertain health, and days that began with necessity long before they reached anything like beauty. So tonight, instead of meeting Greece at the level of legend, you will meet it at the level of one ordinary human day. You will not arrive as a general, or a great thinker, or a favorite of fortune. You will arrive where most people always arrive, inside the body. Inside heat, light, dust, hunger, custom, and routine. You will feel the world before you judge it, and that is where the old dream shifts, because the mind might admire ancient Greece very quickly, but the body would complain almost at once. That small tension is the hidden engine of the whole journey, and still, there is nothing to fear in it. You are only visiting. You do not have to survive the day. You only have to drift through it slowly enough to understand what it asked of the people who did. Let the modern room stay quietly behind you, like a harbor you no longer need to see in order to trust. Let your breathing settle. Let history arrive as a whisper rather than a lesson. For a few moments longer, feel the present, feel what belongs to now. The softness under your back, the familiarity of your own room, the easy luxury of water that waits nearby without asking to be carried further. The privacy of a wall that closes, a window that seals, a night that can be made darker or lighter at will. These things seem smaller only because they are already yours. History sharpens them. It does this gently, by removing them one at a time. A proper bed, a cool room, clean air that has not shared itself with smoke and bodies and stubborn residue of old cooking fire. The confidence that a fever, a wound, or a bad tooth does not have to become a negotiation between herbs, prayer, and luck. Even before the ancient day truly begins, the present starts to glow more clearly around you. Now the room changes, the mattress thins, the wall roughens into mud of brick and stone. The air warms strangely, as though yesterday's heat has been waiting inside the house all night, and now begins to return itself to you. The silence becomes older and less complete. There is the faint sound of breathing nearby, perhaps more than one sleeper in the same room. The small rustle of cloth, the memory of smoke in the beams, a shutter, a bird at the roof line, somewhere beyond the wall, a goat, or perhaps the suggestion of one. This is the first truth of the dream. Ancient Greece is not marble first, it is body first, and the body wakes here differently. You rise not because you are refreshed, but because the room has made further sleep difficult. Dawn has hardly lifted itself over the roofs, yet the house already feels close. Your bed is no real bed in the modern sense, only a simple place to lie. Perhaps a mat. Perhaps a low frame. Perhaps folded cloth that has known better days. The pillow, if there is one, is hardly more than a rolled garment. Your shoulder remembers every hard point beneath you. Your neck has found new reasons to complain before the sun is even up. Around you the room carries the layered evidence of life lived without separation. Families do not spread themselves through many private chambers. They gather in practical closeness. A single space may hold sleep, storage, talk, mending, and the residue of yesterday's meal. In wealthier houses, there may be more arrangement, more courtyard, more distinction between one function and another. But most lives are not wealthy lives. And most mornings do not begin in gray. They begin in nearness, nearness to walls, to other bodies, to smells you no longer notice because you have stopped expecting air to be empty. There is dust in corners, there is smoke in the memory of the room from cooking fires that have blackened beams and worked their way into cloth. The little window openings, if any, are made for necessity rather than pleasure. There is no clear glass waiting to brighten the morning. There are shutters, perhaps, and whatever breeze feels inclined to enter. If this is summer, the heat has sat all night in the masonry, and now returns itself to you as soon as you wake. If it is winter, the same walls become hard keepers of cold. Either way, the house is not trying to help you. It is simply what stands between you and an even harsher outside. You become aware of your own skin, of yesterday not being entirely gone from it, of the film that gathers when bodies work in warm weather and sleep in close quarters, of the faint itch that be no more than imagination, or might be a tiny creature reminding you that sleep in the ancient world is never fully private. You brush at your arm, you shift your weight, somewhere nearby. Someone else stirs, coughs, sits up. Morning is not announced here by music or alarm, only by the slow surrender of each body to the fact that lying still has stopped being pleasant. Perhaps there is a child still half asleep. Perhaps an older woman is already moving with that practiced quiet that belongs to those who wake before everyone else. Not because they choose serenity, but because work starts before daylight learns its own name. Perhaps a man pulls on a garment and steps outside to judge the sky. Perhaps a pot is touched, a doorbell lifted, a basket checked. The day enters not with grandeur, but with chores already waiting at the threshold. And yet, if you pause within the discomfort, there is something almost tender in the simplicity of the scene. The first blue light is beginning to collect. A bird has found the roof line. Farther off, a dog answers another. The city, if you live in one, is not yet loud. Countryside, if you live beyond the town, has that pale and uncertain quiet that belongs only to the moments before labor fully begins. This is how beauty works in difficult worlds. It does not remove hardship. It appears beside it. Briefly and without apology, you sit up. Your feet find the ground, and the ground finds a way to be either too cool or already warm. Your garment is near at hand, simple and practical. There is no luxurious delay, no long lingering in blankets, no leisurely breakfast tray. The house needs water, and water is never as near as thirst would like. So you step into the early morning, carrying the first task of the day in your hands, before the day has offered you any reward for taking it on. The air outside is kinder than it will be later. Dawn has not yet turned sharp. In that brief gray-gold softness, the streets and paths of ancient Greece look almost forgiving. Stone walls are still cool to the touch. Dust has not fully risen. The market has not yet gathered its smells, its flies, its argument. This is the hour in which the body can believe, for a little while, that the day may remain manageable. But your empty jar says otherwise. You go where the household must go. To a public fountain if you live in a town, to a well if you live farther out, to a place where water waits, but never comes to meet you halfway. The jar itself is honest about what this means. Clay is sturdy, useful, and heavy long before it is filled. Your fingers find the worn curve of the handle or brace the roundness against your hip. Other people are already there, because nobody is the only one who needs water. Women, children, servants, older men sent early, all move through the same quiet necessity. The morning line forms not from ceremony, but from the plain mathematics of survival. Voices are low at first. Water invites a certain practical patience. There may be gossip, but it begins gently, as though everyone understands that the body has not fully arrived in itself yet. Someone comments on the heat that is coming. Someone asks after a relative. Someone notices the level in the cistern. Somewhere a bucket scrapes stone. Somewhere a jar is set down too hard. Even these small sounds matter, because water governs more than thirst. It governs cooking, washing, cleaning, the day's first bread, the condition of hands and floors, and mouths and tools. Before philosophy, Before politics, before the assembly, before theater, before poetry, someone must fetch water. And when it is your turn, the work becomes personal. The jaw fills, the weight changes from manageable to undeniable. Water makes everything real. You lift it carefully, learning again how quickly the body resents useful things. The shoulder tightens, the wrist adjusts, the back offers its opinion. If the walk home rises even slightly, you feel every step. If the street is uneven, you look down more than ahead. If a drop spills, you notice, not because one drop matters in itself, but because effort has sharpened your sense of weight. This is the kind of labor that dissolves into the background of history when great men begin speaking. Yet it may be the most universal act in the ancient world, is caring of what the body needs to go on being a body. There is no hidden system doing it for you, no pipe in the wall, no cold clear stream entering the house by an invisible means. The distance between need and fulfillment is physical, and your muscles are the bridge. Perhaps you make the walk more than once, one jar for drinking, another for the day. Perhaps someone goes with you. Perhaps a child tries to help and slows more than helps. Perhaps a donkey bears part of the burden in wealthier circumstances, though even that does not remove the planning, the time, the constant awareness that water is a thing to secure and guard. The ancient world asks you to remember material reality at all times. Bread has weight, cloth has weight, oil has weight, and water, most of all, has weight on the walk back. The city is beginning to stir. A shutter opens, sandaled feet slap a lane. Somewhere a baker has already risen before everyone else, and you can smell the faint beginning of grain and heat. Somewhere someone curses a stubborn animal. Somewhere temple smoke lifts thinly into the morning. Greece is waking not as a grand civilization, but as 100 small domestic urgencies unfolding at once. By the time you reach home, your hands feel mocked by the jar even after you set it down. The house has changed too. What was merely close and warm now leans toward activity. The first water is in place, but that only means the next need can step forward. Hunger does not wait politely in ancient Greece. It arrives early, plain and non-sentimental breakfast, if it deserves the name in a modern ear, is less a celebration than a truce. The body must be given enough to continue, and so it is given what can be spared. Barley is common, dependable, and rarely inspiring. It becomes cakes, loaves, mash, simple forms of fuel, transformed just enough to chew. If wheat appears, it feels almost luxurious by comparison. But many people know barley far better than luxury. You break the morning bread with fingers that still remember the water jar. The bread is dense, perhaps a little stale, perhaps coarse enough to remind your teeth that flour in this world does not pass through perfect refinement. It has substance, and that substance is the point. It sits in the mouth like work. You chew not because flavor delights you, but because hunger and routine ask. If there are olives, they bring salt and relief. If there is cheese, it is a small brightness. If there are figs, they soften the meal with the memory of sweetness. But plenty of mornings are simpler than that, and simplicity here is not a fashionable ideal. It is the limit of means. Water may be drunk, but often mixed with wine in varying degrees, because the ancient world does not trust pure water with the ease modern people do. Wine diluted becomes not indulgence, but ordinary habit, practical and social at once. Even that small cup carries the world's difference within it. You do not begin with coffee. No fragrant roasted comfort enters the room and politely rearranges your spirit. No butter melts, no eggs wait in the pan. There is only the modest promise that the stomach will not remain entirely empty as labor begins. And meals themselves are not arranged around the modern fantasy of leisure. Nobody asks whether breakfast has become a ritual of self-care. Nobody posts a plate to be admired. Eating is fitted into the morning where it can fit. Some stand, some sit simply. Some take turns according to household order and custom. In many homes, men and women do not gather at the same ease, and the hierarchy of the household shapes even disappointment. Food moves through social rules before it reaches the mouth. Yet hunger, like heat, makes philosophers of everyone. A plain breakfast teaches a plain lesson. Much of life rests on repetition so ordinary it never enters history's grand speech. The same grain, the same hand, the same clay vessel, the same swallowing of what is sufficient rather than delightful. Ancient Greece would eventually speak beautifully about moderation, balance, and virtue. But long before those ideas were refined in words, bodies were practicing a hushed version of them every morning. Perhaps a child asks for more and is told no. Perhaps someone tears the loaf carefully to make it seem larger. Perhaps crumbs are gathered because grain is not a thing to scatter without thought. The little economies of the meal reveal the deeper economy of the age. Nature is generous only in poems, in kitchens. One learns the stubborn arithmetic of survival. Still, outside the doorway, the light has grown more golden. A small wind moves. The scent of crushed herbs somewhere nearby briefly improves the air. For one quiet moment, with bread in hand and the day not yet fully sharpened, you might almost understand why later ages imagined Greece as a place of graceful simplicity. A morning meal, pale sky, stone walls, olive branches beyond. The image is not false. It is simply incomplete. The trouble with beautiful images is that they do not weigh anything. The real day, meanwhile, is about to place itself fully on your skin, because breakfast does not make you feel clean. It only makes you less empty. The body still carries sleep, sweat, ash, dust, and yesterday's labor. So the next old ritual begins, and it is less refreshing than you might hope. Cleanliness in ancient Greece is not the sparkling thing your modern mind wants it to be. It is not steam and soap and white towels and the almost magical disappearance of discomfort down a silver drain. It is management. It is the practical handling of skin in a world where skin is always busy collecting the day. Dust settles, sweat forms, smoke clings, sandals leave the feet. Marked, cloth rubs. The sun does what it does by afternoon. Every person belongs slightly more to the earth than they did at dawn. So you wash as the age allows, perhaps at a basin in the courtyard, perhaps at a public fountain, perhaps with poured water measured by effort rather than abundance. Cold water touches the face, the arms, the neck. It wakes more than it comforts. There is no bottled fragrance waiting to transform the moment. Luxury is simply that some water can be spared for the body at all. And then there is oil, olive oil, that patient golden substance which in Greece touches nearly every layer of life. It lights lamps, it enriches food, it enters ritual. It becomes medicine, offering, trade, and here on your own skin, a form of cleanliness. You rub it over the body not because you wish to shine, but because oil can gather what the day leaves behind. Dust loosens, sweat yields, the surface becomes manageable. Then comes the scrape, the strigil, curved and practical. It slides along the skin with a motion that is part grooming, part small discipline. Oil and grime lift away together. It is an intimate act, though not always a private one. The ancient world keeps fewer secrets from the eyes of others. Bathing can be social, especially among men in athletic or public settings, and the body is not hidden with modern anxiety. Yet acceptance does not equal comfort. You are still a human body being scraped clean by metal in open air, or semi-open space, aware of your own imperfections and everyone else's nearness. We were expecting freshness in the modern sense. You will have to lower your standards and soften your imagination. The skin may feel less burdened. Yes, the visible dust may lessen, but this is not the scentless purity of a tiled bathroom. This is a compromise between body and environment, a useful one, a civilized one even, but still a compromise. Teeth fare no better. No mint rush arrives to redeem the mouth. Perhaps there are simple cleaning practices, twigs to chew, powders, rinses, habits more earnest than effective. Perhaps someone with more means buys finer scented oils or perfumed substances to soften the fact that the human body in a warm climate is forever negotiating with it. But for most people, The aim is modest, not perfection, merely not becoming unbearable. Laundry lies under the same law. Cloth is washed and puffed, beaten in water, scrubbed, dried in light and air. But garments do not cycle through endless, fresh abundance. A tunic is a working companion, not an endlessly replaceable expression of mood. It keeps your shape decent and your skin somewhat covered. It earns its stains. It keeps them too. The modern appetite for crisp fabric and immediate cleanliness would not survive long here. And yet ritual has a calming power even when comfort is limited. The motions repeat day after day. Water, oil, scrape, cloth shaken out, hair tied back or smooth, sandals checked. Body brought into order before the larger disorder of the world begins. There is a strange dignity in that civilization often begins not when life becomes easy, but when people insist on a little form, a little care, a little rhythm inside difficulty. By now, the sun has strengthened. You can feel it before stepping fully into it. That old Mediterranean certainty gathering itself above roof lines and courtyards. The body is as ready as it will ever be, which is to say, not ready enough, but presentable. You turn toward your clothing, and the day asks to be worn. Ancient Greek dress, admired from the distance of sculpture, looks almost effortless. Long folds, clean lines, draped simplicity. It gives the impression that everyone moved through the world as though guided by a patient breeze and an artist's eye. But clothing, when it belongs to a living body rather than a statue, behaves less nobly. You begin with cloth, and cloth in this world is important precisely because it is not in. The garment has labor inside it. Wool has been cleaned, spun, woven. Linen has been grown, worked, turned into usable fabric. Someone's hands are in every fold. You do not throw on a shirt without thought, because shirts are not casual facts of abundance. They are possessions shaped by work. A tunic or chiton is practical, but practicality is not the same as convenience. The fabric must sit properly, the fastening must hold. The belt must do its part if a pin loosens or a fold slips at the wrong moment. The body can become embarrassingly public very quickly, and the body, in ancient Greece, is always closer to the world than modern clothing allows. There are no layers of engineered comfort, no hidden stretch, no cushioned athletic sole, no breathable miracle fabric promising to keep you cool, dry, and odor-free. There is simply cloth against skin and leather against foot, and the understanding that heat will have its say no matter what you wear. Sandals, if you are fortunate enough to own a decent pair, feel like a bare minimum rather than indulgence. Leather straps hold, soles protect just enough. Your feet still know the road. Stone steps press upward. Sun-warmed ground reminds you that summer in Greece is not a concept, but a fort. If you are poorer, perhaps the foot meets earth more directly, and then every small hazard of the road becomes a tiny negotiation. Sharp edges, mud, dry dust, animal droppings, cracked ground. The world is wonderfully immediate when there is almost nothing between you and it. Head coverings are not universal comfort either. Shade is partial. Skin darkens, burns, toughens, and yields to the season whether you prefer it or not. The shoulders learn endurance. The face narrows its eyes. By midday, the sun can make every errand feel like a moral test, and still the errands continue. Ancient Greece is full of beautiful light, but beautiful light can be exhausting when there is nowhere cool enough to hide from it. Yet there is grace here too, if a quieter one, a white or undyed garment in morning brightness, a brief flap of cloth in a coastal wind, the simple geometry of a gathered hem, the sound of leather on stone, the way a line of people on a street can look, for one accidental moment, like a painted frieze come to life. This is why memory flatters the ancient world. It catches these surfaces and forgets what the body underneath them was enduring. You step out dressed for the day, though dressing is too elegant a word for what has happened. You have wrapped yourself in a working arrangement. You have secured enough modesty to move in public, enough fabric to respect custom, enough protection to face stone, light, and labor. It will do in the ancient world. Doing is often all anything ever does. So the house falls behind you, and now the wider day opens, not toward leisure, not toward self-expression, toward work. This is where the dream of Greece becomes wonderfully ordinary. Most people are not discussing virtue beneath shaded colonnades. Most are not composing tragedies, sponsoring temples, or shaping arguments that will survive for thousands of years. Most are simply busy, and busyness in an ancient society is not the same smooth digital blur that modern people complain about. It is direct, material, physical, hands-on tools, bodies in fields, feet carrying goods, backs bent, eyes narrowed against light. If you are rural, the land tells you what kind of day it will be. Fields need tending, vines need attention, olive trees need care measured not in sentiment, but in season after season of patient work. Animals need feeding, guiding, guarding. Weather is not a background topic. It is partner, threat, and judge. A poor harvest is not an abstract economic event. It is fear entering the household and sitting down, uninvited. If you live nearer the city, the labor changes shape, but not seriously. Potters shape clay that must survive kiln and market. Smiths hammer usefulness out of metal wire. Heat and sound make the workshop its own separate climate. Fishers return with salt on the skin and uncertainty in the basket. Sailors move goods and rumors between ports. Sellers lay out wares that may or may not be worth a full day of standing in the agora. Carpenters shave and fit wood. Stoneworkers chip at the stubborn earth to produce buildings that later ages will admire without ever feeling the ache and the risk that made them possible. And inside the household there's a parallel economy of labor that never quite ends. Grain must be ground, dough made, cloth woven, children watched, floors swept, fires tended, water carried again, tools cleaned, baskets repaired, food preserved if there is enough to preserve. The ancient home is not a place one simply inhabits. It is a machine powered by constant small acts, most of them repetitive, many of them invisible to the kind of history that prefers speeches to chores. There are, of course, moments of rest, a pause beneath shade, a cup passed from hand to hand, a quiet joke, a brief stretch of wind from the sea. Human beings carve relief wherever they can, but rest is earned from labor, not built around it. The day's rhythm is determined by necessity. You work because the house must continue. You work because the body must be fed. You work because tomorrow will ask the same question again, and will not be impressed if you answer badly. There is something almost hypnotic in the repetition of such a life. The same path to market, the same motion of grinding grain, the same time of cord, lifting a basket, checking a roof tile, turning a bird. It is easy to see how the ancient world produced people who observed nature so closely. Repetition slows the mind into noticing the way dust changes color by hour, the way shadows lean, the way a jar rings differently when full, the way summer light hardens every outline by noon. If philosophy was born here, some of it must have begun in the patient spaces created by repetitive labor, where the hands are occupied and the mind wanders because it has nowhere else to go. But labor is not the only demand made on a free male body in this world. Citizenship, especially in proud cities, comes with a harder edge. Greece does not only ask you to work, it asks many men to stand ready for war. The heroic version of war arrives later, polished by poets and carved into memory. The real version begins in obligation. If you are a free male citizen, especially of a place like Athens or Sparta, military duty is not a dramatic turn in your story. It is part of the furniture of adult life. The city does not ask whether your temperament prefers gentleness. It asks what shield you can afford, how well you hold formation, whether your body can row, march, endure. Training begins early enough to settle into the bones. In Sparta, it takes a particularly hard and famous form, though hard forms of preparation appear elsewhere too. Boys become young men under systems that value discipline, obedience, and the ability to suffer without creating inconvenience for others. Even in less severe cities, the expectation remains. A citizen is not merely a voter. a speaker, or a property holder. He is a potential defender of the polis, and the polis remembers this whether he wants to or not. Imagine standing in a line of men so close that your safety depends on their steadiness as much as your own. The phalanx, admired from afar as a brilliant military system, is in bodily terms a study in compressed fear. Shield against shield, shoulder near shoulder, spear forward, weight distributed across feet, already tired by heat and ground. You do not fight as a solitary hero with room for flourish. You fight as part of a moving wall that works only if everyone resists the urge to be an individual. The modern mind, trained on stories of personal distinction, might find that strangely suffocating. Ancient warfare often preferred the opposite lesson. Survive by being one section of a structure larger than yourself, and there is cost before battle even begins. Armor is expensive. Good equipment is not magically granted by the state in every context. Wealth helps a man look more secure in war, as it helps him almost everywhere else. Bronze, leather, shield, helmet, greaves, spear. All these things have to come from somewhere. Poverty follows a citizen into battle as faithfully as honor does. The poorer man may still serve, but with less protection and often less choice in how close he must stand to danger. For rowers in the Navy, the burden changes shape again. Oars do not ask for bravery in the theatrical sense. They ask for endurance. The sea offers no applause. It offers repetition, command, muscle, time, sweat, and the knowledge that battle may arrive while you are already exhausted from the work required merely to place the ship where battle can happen. The empire of movement across the Aegean is built not only on strategy, but on aching shoulders. Even when not actively at war, a city may feel suspended between one threat and the next. Greece is a landscape of neighboring powers, old rivalries, fresh anxieties, alliances that thicken and thin, ambitions that are rarely content to stay quiet. Peace is precious, but often temporary. The body knows this before the mind puts it into words. A man can be in the marketplace in the morning and discussing levies, training, provisioning, or rumors of conflict by afternoon. Civic life and military life mingle until they become difficult to separate, and yet admiration persists. Later generations will call these societies noble, disciplined, courageous. They are not wrong, but courage, when lived from the inside, often feels less like glory and more like the inability to step away from what your city expects of you. You. A citizen's pride and a citizen's danger are braided tightly together in the Greek world. If that sounds burdensome, the burden carried by women is narrower, quieter, and in many places harder to name because it is woven into ordinary expectation so completely that it can pass for custom rather than confinement. To understand a woman's life in much of ancient Greece, especially in Athens, we must shrink the map. The city may be lively, political, argumentative, public, but her world is often made smaller on purpose, not empty, never empty, full of labor, responsibility, and emotional weight, but smaller. She rises early because households do not run themselves. Water, bread, cloth, children, servants where servants exist. Storage, cleaning, preparation, mending, all these fall within the orbit of her responsibility. It is not a life of idleness. It is a life so active that idleness becomes almost mythical. Her hands know spinning, weaving, sorting, measuring, tending. Her mind knows the inventory of the home, because survival depends on such knowledge being exact. Yet capability does not become public freedom in many cities. Respectability is attached to modest invisibility. A woman who moves too freely through public spaces risks not admiration, but judgment. Her body is meant to be guarded, her reputation watched, her ties to father, husband, and household made legible through restraint. The famous world of public speech, legal argument, civic debate, and philosophical wandering belongs largely to men. Even when a woman's work makes such public life possible, she is often expected to support the structure without stepping onto its stage. Marriage arrives early for men, sometimes while girlhood has hardly loosened its hold. A husband may be much older. The arrangement is practical, social, familial, economic. Affection may grow, or may not. That is not always the first question anyone asks. Dowry matters. Lineage matters. Legitimacy matters. Children matter, especially sons. A woman's value is measured within a framework she did not design and is rarely invited to critique. This does not mean women are without intelligence, wit, influence, or interior life. History is full of badly lit rooms behind which rich human consciousness continued perfectly well. It means only that much of that consciousness does not survive in public record with the same ease as male voices do. We hear the assembly because the assembly was built to be heard. We hear the philosopher because he stood in places where words carried. The quiet authority of women inside households, the emotional weather of marriages, the long management of stores and cloth and illness in children. These leave fainter marks, though they shape daily life just as deeply. There are exceptions, and Sparta always arrives in the conversation with its distinct customs. Spartan women could move more freely, exercise openly, and hold property to a degree that astonished others. But freedom there is tied to the larger harshness of a militarized society. It is not modern liberation. It is another ancient arrangement, powerful in some ways and demanding in others, aimed always at the needs of the state. For many women elsewhere, life is a narrowing of visible range paired with an expansion of silent duty. The world worships Athena, Artemis, Hera, Aphrodite, Demeter. Goddesses stand tall in the story and ritual. Real women live much closer to the floor. The loom, the cradle, the storage jar, the threshold, they are not encouraged to cross too often. Ancient Greece could imagine female divinity in magnificent forms, while granting ordinary women remarkably little room. And yet inside these limits, tenderness still exists. A mother smoothing a child's hair, sisters whispering at dusk, an older woman teaching younger hands the patience of thread, shared laughter over a badly risen loaf, the secret endurance of those who build continuity without being offered much public glory for it. Sleep history must notice such people gently, because civilizations often rest most heavily on those whom their monuments barely mention. If the city likes to praise itself as free, then this is the moment to look at freedom more carefully. From a distance, Athens gleams as the birthplace of democracy. Up close, democracy turns out to have a fairly narrow doorway. The assembly is real. Citizens gather, argue, vote, decide, accuse, persuade. There is something undeniably electric in the idea that policy and law can emerge not solely from a king's will, but from civic participation. Men speak in public, cases are heard, offices are distributed, juries deliberate, the city imagines itself as a community of active political bodies rather than passive subjects. That is no small thing, but the list of those allowed inside the definition of citizen is much smaller than the city's self-congratulation might lead you to expect. Women are excluded, slaves are excluded, children are excluded, foreign residents, even those who live and work in the city for years. Entire human lives can support the machinery of democracy without receiving any share in its central promise. A man may stand proudly in the assembly and call the city free, while the person who fetched his water that morning remains legally voiceless. Even among citizens, participation is not always noble in the way textbooks like to imply. Public life can be noisy, vain, impulsive, swayed by charisma and anger, as much as by reason. Offices may be assigned by lot in some context, which carries its own strange mixture of egalitarian ideal and alarming unpredictability. A system can be innovative and still deeply human in all the unsteady ways that words suggest. There is also the famous practice of ostracism, one of those details that sounds almost elegant until you imagine being the person whose name appears again and again on broken pottery. The city, wary of tyranny, gives itself a mechanism to remove figures who seem too powerful, too magnetic, too likely to tilt the balance. In principle, this protects the polis. In practice, it reveals something eternal about political communities. They admire brilliance until brilliance begins to make them nervous. Still, for all its limitations, democracy in Athens changes the air of history. It creates habits of speech, participation, and civic identity that echo far beyond its own. The trick is not to romanticize it into something it never was. Ancient democracy is not modern equality, waiting in an earlier costume. It is a partial experiment, impressive and flawed, alive with possibility for some, and silence for many more. Beneath this proud public life lies a harder truth, one that many polished celebrations of Greece would prefer to set quietly aside. Freedom for citizens rested, in part, on the unfreedom of others. The city's visible elegance had hidden hands all over it. Slavery in ancient Greece is not an unfortunate footnote attached to an otherwise noble tale. It is woven directly into the fabric of daily life. Some households own slaves not as a mark of fantastic wealth, but because the practice is normal, expected, structurally ordinary. To modern ears, this lands with a terrible heaviness, and it should. Yet in the ancient world, many people lived so close to the system that they stopped seeing it as a wound and began treating it as part of the floor beneath their feet. Slaves come from many places. War brings captives. Trade moves bodies as it moves jars, timber, metal, and grain. Birth seals some lives into bondage from the beginning. A person may be local or foreign, skilled or unskilled, young or old, and still exist inside the category of property. That is one reason the system runs so deep. It does not depend on one narrow story. It depends on power repeating itself until it looks ordinary. In the household, a slave may carry water, prepare food, clean rooms, accompany family members, help raise children, watch doors, or keep account. In another setting, a slave may work with tools, with animals, with shipping, with trade, with records. Some are trusted, some are visible, many are simply expected. The terrible quietness of the arrangement may be the most unsettling part. A civilization can become used to comfort provided by hands it does not fully acknowledge. Elsewhere, the conditions grow harsher still. In the mines, labor turns darker, narrower, and harder to look at for long. Bodies move underground where silver can be drawn from the earth for coins, trade, civic ambition, and public splendor above. It is enough here to understand the structure, without lingering over every cruelty. Greece's admired surface did not rise by thought alone. It rose partly on hidden labor and unequal suffering. Some slaves are educated, some manage business, some teach children. Skill may change daily experience, but it does not erase bondage. Freedom, when granted, remains partial and uncertain. The mark of unfreedom lingers even after legal status shifts. What matters for the script is not outrage alone, but clarity. The Greek world looked bright in many places. It was also upheld by people who were not invited into its most celebrated language of liberty. To see that gently is still to see it truthfully. And then after such a heavy truth, the old day asks to be softened again. So let the mind step back for a moment from institutions and return to the more fragile fact beneath them all, the body. A body that works, tires, heats, hungers, aches, and sometimes fails. If you wake feverish, coughing, aching, or sharp with pain, there is no modern safety net beneath you, no clean corridor of guaranteed care, no humming machines, no sealed room of sterile confidence. There are healers, physicians, midwives, herbal habits, temple rituals, and practical knowledge passed from one person to another. All of this matters, none of it removes uncertainty. The theory of the humus offers one way to understand illness. The body becomes a shifting balance of fluids and temperaments, and health is imagined as proportion kept in order. There is sincerity in this effort to observe, classify, and interpret. There is also limitation, because the body can be watched carefully and still remain mysterious. Some treatments soothe, rest can help, light food can help, fresh air, where possible, can help. Certain herbs may truly ease discomfort, but many remedies belong to a world in which action and hope are closely bound together. When knowledge thins, people do what they can. They may press, dream, bind, pray, wait. Surgery exists, though no sleepy listener needs every detail. It is enough to know that pain stood much closer to it than it does now. An infection waited near every wound. A cut could turn serious. A fever could linger. A broken bone might heal badly. A tooth might transform an ordinary week into a private misery. Childbirth remains one of the clearest places where ancient courage reveals itself in plain domestic form. Women cross that threshold again and again, under conditions the modern world has only partly learned to soften. Midwives bring experience. Families bring care. Ritual brings hope. Yet the room remains uncertain in ways that would trouble any modern mind. Plague and epidemic can move through crowded places with a dreadful efficiency. Houses sit close, water is shared, heat rises, trade routes connect strangers to one another long before medicine knows how to answer what travels along them. One household sickens, then another. The city grows quieter in a different way. Still, people continue. They brew what can be brewed. They call for help where help exists. They sleep when sleep arrives. They trust gods when knowledge runs out. The body has always been fragile. Ancient Greece does not invent fragility. It simply leaves it more exposed. Yet humans cannot live long beside pain and labor without creating forms of shared relief. One of the most remarkable is theater, which in Greece becomes not a light diversion, but a civic and emotional landscape all its own. Imagine moving toward a great open-air theater carved into a hillside, the stone seats receiving thousands. The sky is above you, wide and unroofed. The city gathers not in a private room, but under daylight, as though drama belongs to the same natural order as wind and sun. There is grandeur here, yes, but also a kind of collective vulnerability. Everyone watches together. Everyone hears the same chorus rise. Everyone lets story pass through the body and company. The performances are long by modern standards, and the day fills with them. Tragedies unfold with deliberate weight. Families are broken by faith, by pride, by old curses and new mistake. Gods press on human lives. Messengers arrive with ruin. Queens grieve. Kings fall. The audience does not come merely to be entertained in a casual sense. It comes to participate in a civic ritual of feeling, to let the city examine itself through story. Then comedy enters with its own wild freedoms. Public figures may be mocked, habits exaggerated, bodies turned ridiculous. The same civilization that speaks elegantly about form and proportion also delights in rough laughter, in satire, in the exposure of vanity. Greek culture does not divide cleanly into noble seriousness and low humor. It contains both, often in neighboring breath. Actors wear masks, and those masks matter. They enlarge expression, transform identity, carry voice. A single human face would be too small for the space, too private for the communal scale of the event. The chorus sings and moves in common, binding the action into something more musical, more ritualized, more dreamlike. Even if you do not understand every layered reference, the atmosphere itself does part of the work. The theater is a place where the city watches itself think and suffer out loud. There is something soothing, oddly enough, in the formality of it. Not the content always, because tragedies can be full of grief and violence, but the structure. The measured entrance, the repeated chorus, the awareness that story unfolds within pattern. Sleep and ritual have always known each other. A repeated form tells the body it does not need to stay on high alert. Even sorrow, when patterned, becomes easier to hold. When the crowd spills out later into the light, voices carry lines and judgments, praise, complaint. Someone preferred one playwright to another. Someone wept. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone feels confirmed in every opinion they brought in. Another feels subtly changed. Public culture in Greece is not quiet, but it is deeply shared. You do not consume art alone in earbuds or walking past strangers. What? You sit among citizens and bodies and breath and weather. and the play becomes an event not merely in the mind, but in the whole city. And then, just when you think the day has already offered enough thought and feeling, Athens in particular reminds you that thinking itself can become a kind of street cred. Philosophy in the Greek imagination is not always confined to a distant academy. It can appear in a public square, beneath a portico, in a gymnasium, beside a workshop, at a shared meal, or in the path of someone who only meant to finish an errand before the heat grew worse. This is one of the delights of Greece from afar, and one of its mild hazards from within. Thought is visible here. It walks around. There is Socrates, or someone shaped by that same habit of questioning, asking for definitions, just when a person least wants to define anything. There are younger men eager to debate, older men eager to instruct, rival schools arranging the world into systems, causes, virtues, and categories. Ideas do not always remain indoors. They move through the air of the city as naturally as rumor. To admire this is easy. To live beside it every day might be more tiring. Yet perhaps that is precisely why Greek thought took on its memorable intensity. It did not emerge from perfect comfort. It emerged from a world where status, mortality, politics, and uncertainty kept pressing on ordinary life. When the world feels unstable, the question of how to live becomes difficult to postpone. And death, in ancient Greece, is never very far from that question. Not because the Greeks were uniquely dark in temperament, but because their conditions left mortality close to the skin. Children do not all survive. Women die in childbirth. Many illness comes suddenly. Wounds turn, ships vanish, harvests fail. The boundary between an ordinary day and a tragic one is thinner than modern comfort usually allowed. Burial matters because remembrance matters. Ritual matters because the dead are not thought of as nothing. Proper rites, proper care, proper passage, these help the living remain in right relation to those who have gone. To be unburied, unmarked, or forgotten is not merely sad. It is unsettling in a deeper way, and all around this uncertain mortal life move the gods. Zeus in weather and authority, Athena in wisdom and civic favor, Poseidon in the sea's move, Apollo in plague, prophecy, and brightness, Demeter in grain, Artemis in wild places, Dionysus in loosened boundaries, festival and fear. The divine in Greece is not tucked away into private belief. It hangs over roads, homes, ships, births, crops, and public ceremonies. You make offerings because uncertainty asks for company. You pray because the world is larger than your household and your plan. You honor the powers around you because ancient life leaves too much exposed to pretend that control belongs fully to human hand. Whether the gods explain fate or simply give fate a language, they shape the emotional weather of the age. This, perhaps, is the deepest contrast between your modern bed and the Greek day you have just wandered through. The modern world often hides its fragility inside systems. Ancient Greece leaves fragility in plain sight. Bodies break, customs constrain, labor repeats, sickness lingers. The dead remain close. The gods are remembered because forgetting feels dangerous. And still, in the middle of all that exposure, people build arguments, dramas, festivals, temples, meals, families, rituals, and ways of naming beauty. They do not wait for perfect safety before creating meaning. They create meaning because perfect safety never arrived. By now, the day is lengthening toward evening in your imagination. The heat that climbed so steadily has begun, at last, to loosen. Stone gives back the light more softly, voices lower. A small breeze threads between walls or through olive branches. Somewhere, a lamp is being ready. Somewhere bread is broken again. Somewhere a child grows heavy with sleep. Somewhere an old man is still talking. Somewhere a woman folds cloth in fading light. Somewhere the sea is losing its brightness by degree. You have not conquered ancient Greece. You were never meant to. You have only spent a day close enough to feel how much ordinary life demanded there. Water before comfort, bread before pleasure, labor before leisure, ritual before certainty, public greatness resting on hidden work, beauty existing beside hardship rather than replacing. Now, because this is history for sleep and not a contest of endurance, the old world can begin to recede. The mud brick house softens first, the sandals loosen, the jar grows light in your hands, the marketplace thins, the assembly empties, the chorus fades into something like wind. Temple steps remain for a moment as pale shapes in late sun. Then they too lose their edges. What remains is not the difficulty itself, but the contrast. Water waiting near you, that being carried, a room that closes, a bed that does not bargain with straw and smoke, air that belongs mostly to you, privacy that does not have to be negotiated from architecture, medicine that exists beyond herbs, prayer, and chant. These things glow more gently once history removes them and hands them back. So let gratitude arrive without forcing it into words. You do not need a final lesson pinned neatly to the night. It is enough to feel the present become softer around you. Enough to notice that your own breathing is easier than the breathing of the imagined day you have just left. Enough to know that somewhere in the long human past, people lived with far less comfort and still found language for one. Perhaps that is the hidden loop after all. The less certain you feel that you would last a day in ancient Greece, the more remarkable it becomes that millions did, and not only did, but loved, argued, prayed, worked, laughed, raised children, watched plays, crossed seas, feared storms, asked difficult questions, and made ideas the modern world still lives among. They were not marble, they were warm, tired, limited, clever, unjust, devoted, and entirely human. Now let the last images blur, olive branches at dusk, a lamp through a doorway, a courtyard cooling, a bowl set aside, quiet footstep, murmured voices fading, a roofline beneath the first stars. The world does not end, it only softens. You do not need to hold on to every detail. Let the facts drift where facts drift when sleep is near. Let the names go first, then the arguments, then the structure of the day itself. Keep only the feeling if you like. Warm stone after sunset, distant water, cloth settling, the sense of having visited another age and returned with nothing heavy in your hand. And if, just before sleep takes the last bright corners of thought, you find yourself imagining ancient Greece once more, let it come not as a hall of statues, but as a lived place full of ordinary bodies moving through heat and light and uncertainty. Let it arrive gently, let it leave gently too. The room you are in now is still here. The bed is still beneath you. The water is near. The night is safe enough. History can stand watch at the threshold while you drift. And somewhere very far away, in a house of stone, mud and cool dust, the ancient day has finally gone quiet.